Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. And it is the time again where we find ourselves on the HWBot homepage for a little bit of an announcement, because a new competition has started, and that competition is, for the fourth time now, Cheapaz chips. This time, round 2 of 2023, centered around the GTX 560. So the competition has started 3 days ago and has 42 more days to go. I have, as of today, bought my card to participate with, because I don't actually have any 560 non-TIs. I have 2 TI cards and an OEM card, but I don't actually have a regular 560 that uses the GF114 core. If you want to know how to differentiate these, the OEM 560 that I mentioned has a GF110 core. Those are not allowed because they have a different core, and they also have additional VRAM. So if you see a 560 with 1.2 gigabytes of VRAM, that's an OEM. Don't get those. You need to get one with either 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes, though the 2 gigabyte cards are kind of rare, and you don't really need a 2 gigabyte card for any of these benchmarks, so a 1 gigabyte card is just fine. So, yeah. And well, this video kind of just acts as my formal invitation for everyone who watches this to also participate, because Cheapaz chips, as the name might imply, is designed to be cheap, have a low barrier of entry, just be easy to participate in. So it's mainly aimed at new people who want to, try out overclocking as a hobby on the budget, or just want to learn a little bit more about electronics without spending a lot of money, and also having a bit of fun on the meantime. Maybe you watched like the Gamers Nexus or the Jay's 2 cents overclocking beef with each other, where they try continuously more crazy stuff. If you want to ever try that, this is basically your chance to do so. So, yeah. That would be it, basically. So, the benchmarks chosen for this round is GPU-Pi, CloudGate, and Firestrike. Benchmarks that are fairly short. Last time we had Heaven and Vantage in here, which are very long benchmarks. I think Heaven needs over 4 minutes to have a single pass. All of these should pass within like 2 minutes. So these are pretty quick benchmarks, especially GPU-Pi. On a 560, if I want to guess, probably 1.5 minutes. The other benchmarks probably the same too. So, I mean, Firestrike is basically tradition at this point. It's kind of been always there. So, Firestrike is quick. It's a nice benchmark. I also like GPU-Pi. And then there's a little bit of a new kid on the block, because CloudGate is the first time that it's been in a Cheapaz chips comp that I participated in. Mostly because CloudGate, from what I've heard, is really, really CPU and RAM bound. But this time it's only the GPU part which might not have that problem. However, the rules have been changed nonetheless, because rather than having a 5 GHz maximum speed on your CPU, you now have a 4.5 GHz maximum speed, and you're only allowed to use 4 cores, no hyperthreading. So whether that is to make CloudGate less CPU dependent by just nerfing everyone's CPU, or maybe this is just to make slower, older CPUs like an old Core 2 Quad more competitive. I don't really know. None of these benchmarks like Firestrike and GPU-Pi don't really care about the CPU you have, so I'm guessing it's either because of CloudGate or just because they want people with really slow CPUs to be even more competitive, though I don't really think it's been a problem in the past. I literally subbed GTX 260 scores on a Core 2 Duo the other day, and the score was fine. But anyway, so the rules have been changed. You can see the full rules here. Just go on the HWBot website. You need to be using a specific wallpaper. You need to show CPU-Z and GPU-Z specific tabs and stuff like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the announcement and the invitation. I want to use the rest of this video to go on a little bit of a list, like a tier list of what GTX 560s you should be considering, because there's quite a lot of them out there. So I've made a little bit of a list of the most common GTX 560 models that you can find, or that I could find on my local market in Europe. it should be pretty similar in North America. If you live more in the East, you could have access to a few more different models that are harder to get here. I didn't include those, so this is not a full comprehensive list. This is just the popular like models that you can easily get on like eBay here, and I've just sort of listed them off, and I'm gonna go through them now. So one of the most common options is this Asus card right here. It's sold as the Direct CU, and it's a pretty decent choice. It has a 6-phase V-Core VRM. Not anything amazing about it. I don't know what exact MOSFETs it has, and the output filter doesn't look that amazing either. It just has a 6-phase V-Core, which I guess is fine, because we're talking about 560s here. A 6-phase is probably more than you need for these. So if your card has a 6-phase VRM, especially one that uses 3 MOSFETs per phase like this one, you're probably fine. Better models than this are available. We're going to get into those, but this Asus model is by far the most common of the better models. So if you can't find any of the others that we're going to go into, you can get this one and be fine. So yeah, this is a solid option for if everything else you can get is just like a 4-phase or a reference board. But there's not really anything special about it. Like the only other thing that you can see is that it has fuses. So if the VRM blows up on you, which it shouldn't, but if it does, the fuse is gonna prevent the fire from starting. And that's pretty much it with it. The cooler this comes with apparently isn't the greatest. It's only a single fan. So really the only special thing about this card is that it has a 6-phase V-Core, and therefore probably is strong enough to handle some quite significant increases in voltage. One thing I also forgot to mention is, as you might see, the GPU says GF114-400A1. That's actually a TI. So most of these images, if not all, are actually of 560 Ti's. That's mostly just because if you search for 560, well, Google also gives you results for 560 Ti's. And, well, they share the PCBs. Like, if you can get a 560 Ti with that PCB, you should be able to get a regular 560 with that PCB too. There may be some exceptions, like the next one, where that isn't the case. I'm still including them because, well, I'm not entirely sure if a regular 560 with this PCB exists, but I have no hard evidence that it doesn't. So in case you see one of these, I still want to include them because they are worth getting. Speaking of worth getting, this is the Gigabyte SoC. This, in my opinion, is the best one because it has the best output filter. Also a very strong VRM. Sadly, this is one where I'm not entirely sure if it exists as a regular 560, because the code right here implies it's a regular 560, however the website where I got the image from says it's a TI. So if they don't specify it's a TI in the code, that might mean they don't have an SoC for the regular 560, or the website mislabeled it. I'm not entirely sure. I'm including this card because it has an amazing output filter. Like you can see, that's a lot of capacitors right there. It also has a lot of multi-layer ceramics in the middle here, and then on the back side, which we don't have an image of right here, it has even more capacitors, including a prod-lyzer, which none of the other cards have. This just has the best output filter, and it also, again, comes with a 6-phase V-Core VRM with even stronger MOSFETs. So you can see how the package from these MOSFETs is slightly different to the Asus card. Like you can see that it uses the package that the Asus card uses for the memory VRM, and then the core VRM is using a different one. So this package of MOSFET is a little bit less efficient, but can handle a lot more current than this package. So this VRM is gonna take even more current. So basically it's even stronger, and it has a stronger output filter. So yeah, this is just a straight upgrade from the Asus card. The heatsink this comes with also has more than one fan. I don't exactly know how good the heatsink is. I think it's decent because I've had a 560 Ti SoC for benching a while back, and it was pretty decent. So yeah, if you can find a regular 560 with this PCB, this is my recommendation. This, in my opinion, is the best one to get. It doesn't have the strongest VRM, but it has the best output filter with a VRM that's strong enough. There is one that's even stronger. We're going to get into that. But in my opinion, I don't think you'll be able to max out this VRM. And the output filter, in my opinion, is therefore the more important thing, because no other card even comes close to what this card has in output filter. Then we have the MSI Hawk. This is another card that I'm not entirely 100% sure exists as a regular 560, but I'm still including it because, again, I can't rule it out. So, this is the Big Hawk, because there's also a Small Hawk. And this Big Hawk is that VRM that's even stronger, because this is an 8-phase using IR direct FETs. So in terms of current handling capability, this is the strongest VRM. This VRM is like basically the same that MSI put on the 680 Lightning, and here it is on a 560. So yeah, they just went completely nuts with the MOSFETs and phase selection for the VCore VRM. The output filter looks decent too, like that's pretty decent for 560 standards, but it's nowhere near what the Gigabyte has, like counting all the stuff that's on the back that you can't see here. So this card, if you can't find a Gigabyte, but you can find this, I would go for this one. It also has a BIOS switch, which I guess is nice to have if you want to use that. But yeah, like this is just ridiculous overkill in the VRM department, but a little bit lackluster for the output filter, because this is all you get. This is what you get. There's nothing on the back like the Gigabyte card has, because you can see there's just no space. You immediately have memory modules, whereas like this entire area is filled out with capacitors on the back on the Gigabyte card. So yeah, but this is still a pretty good PCB. So if you can find the Big Hawk, it's easily identifiable because it just says MSI Hawk on the PCB here. Get this. But in case you can't get this one's also nice, and I zoomed in too far. So this is the Baby Hawk, and as you can see, it has a sticker where it would usually say Hawk. That's because this one also says Hawk. It just not officially, because this is a 560 using the 460 Hawk PCB. So basically, this is the proper 560 Hawk, and this is its predecessor, the 460 Hawk, but using the proper 560 GPU. And well, the VRM is a bit of a downgrade. We're going back to a 6-phase. The output filter is, a bit smaller too, and we don't have IR direct FETs anymore. We have a mixture of the MOSFET types that the Asus and the Gigabyte card were using. It's still a pretty decent card. This is actually the one that I went for, basically because it's the only card I could find that the seller actually responded to me that had a 6-phase. So this is the one that I'm going to be using. Now I have a 460 Hawk with this exact PCB. It is pretty decent. I don't have any complaints about it. The only real complaint I had is that the VRM is not cooled. Like, it doesn't have a heatsink on it. This is completely naked and just cool the airflow that comes off the heatsink, which might not be that great of an idea, because for some reason this one has a base plate for cooling the VRM, even though this doesn't actually need to. And these two, as far as I know, also have a heatsink. Like, you can see the little holes where they put the heatsink onto the VRM. This one does not have a heatsink on the VRM. So the one issue with this PCB is that you probably want to, like, well, if you're not using the stock heatsink, because that just takes care of it. If you like water cooling this, just put like a little fan on the VRM and it should be fine. But yeah, this is another one of those 6-phase PCBs that are just decent. It's like the Asus one. I would maybe prefer this one over the Asus, because even though the VRM cooling's a bit worse, the GPU cooling should be better, because this comes with a dual fan heatsink that just also has a larger fin stack than the Asus card. And if I remember correctly, you also get an OCP unlock switch on the back, which the Asus does not have. And the Asus also uses a proprietary rebranded VRM controller, whereas this here just uses some UPI controller. So this one should be a little bit easier to mod, even though the Asus card also has. Like, even though this is a rebranded controller, that there are documentations on how to mod this card. So, yeah, this is another one of those it's just okay. It's fine. I would still prefer one of these two, if you can find them, if they exist, over this. But this is fine, which is why I ultimately chose it. Now we get into the ones that you should maybe avoid. So this is a style of PCB. Oh, this is actually not a 400. This is just a regular 560. Yeah, this is 325. Whatever. So this is the kind of PCB you tend to get when you get a blower card. So they have the VRM on the left side, and they have a 4-phase. So it's a 4-phase, 1-phase memory again. This specifically is a Zotac card because it's using 1200 microfarad caps. Usually you get 820s. And this card is, well, it's a 4-phase. That's the main problem. No, actually you don't get 2 low sides per phase. No, wait. Yes, you do get 2 low sides per phase. They just have absolutely pathetic high sides. Jesus. Yeah, okay, that might not be standard. That might just be the Zotac card. I think the other blowers that are not Zotac use proper MOSFETs for the high sides, but that is concerning. Like, that small thing as your high side. Like, you get 2 low sides per phase, but that is concerning. Yeah, so, like, basically, if you get a blower card, you're going to get a PCB that looks like this. And the main problems is, first off, the PCB is pretty small. So if you want to put a water block on this, you might have clearance issues with the VRM over here. You're also going to be dropping down to a 4-phase, which is the point where I'm like, you are probably going to max this out. You might need water cooling to max it out. I don't know how far these go on air, but you are probably maxing this out on water cooling, because I would be expecting to go somewhere to the 1.3 volts range. And at that point, I'm not too sure a 4-phase would live to see the day. So, yeah, like, if you put a lot of cooling on this VRM, it might be fine. But be prepared that it may blow up. So these 4-phase blower cards, they are, well, yeah, like, I would avoid them if I can. They are better than the 3-phase VRMs, because those also exist, but I would very much try to get either this or this, if these two aren't available. These two are very rare, so don't be surprised if you don't see them. But like this or this, they're pretty decent. So yeah, like the blower cards, that VRM is not too great. Like, not too great. With enough cooling, you might be able to make it work, but I would avoid them if I can. Now, this is another 4-phase. This is the sort of reference PCB. And yeah, this is just a kind of big PCB. Like, the PCB is just physically large. But this is another 4-phase. This one is using proper high sides, like you can see, but it's another 4-phase. Like, the output filter is average. It's not bad, but it's nothing special either. I think it has another line of multi-layer ceramics on the back here, which is decent. So the output filter is at least not awful on this, but it's another 4-phase VRM, and well, actually, I think this has a base plate for cooling. It's just that it's another 4-phase. So the same things apply to this card that apply to this. If you want to max this out on water cooling, you are probably going to get pretty close to just maxing this out, and it might blow up on you. So, yeah. But it's at least not going to be as bad as this. So this is the OC from Gigabyte. Not to be confused with this, the SOC. Because this has a 3-phase. It does come with a heatsink, but it's a 3-phase. And there's not much you can do at this point. Like, this is just not enough. This is inadequate. I've had a 460 SE with a VRM like this, and it blew up pretty much the second I applied 1.2 volts, which is not even that much. Like, it's above the stock voltage limit, but 1.2 volts, Like, that's what you... Like, you can run 1.2 volts on the stock heatsink for Fermi cards. Like, and it didn't even do that. So, yeah, three-phase VRMs, avoid these. Like, avoid these. Like, don't go for them. These are just extremely bad. The only way you can make a card like this work is to e-power it. And given that I'm including this segment mostly for beginners to pick their cards, you're probably not going to e-power your card. So if you see anything that has like 3 inductors, like 3-phase, avoid that. And then we have the last of the common PCBs. I actually have one of my 560 Ti's uses this PCB. Mine's just brown instead of red. And this is another one of the 4-phase VRMs. This also doesn't have a heatsink for the VRM, and it also only has a single fan main heatsink. And in general, it's another one of the 4-phase cards. It's not too great. It's better than this, but I don't think I would go for that. Like, it's a 4-phase. Again, you are probably going to max this out on water cooling, and it might blow up on you. Especially since this one doesn't have any heatsink on it. And then also the output filter on this just kind of looks bad. Like, just there's 2 capacitors that they just couldn't even be bothered to put on. And there's no space on this PCB to put anything on the back. Also, the mounting is weird for this. I think this actually uses AMD mounting spacing because, like you see how regular 560s have like this rectangular mounting spacing. This one's a square. Like, you know, the rectangular, even the small blower one, rectangular, 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 also rectangular. This one's square for some reason, and I think this is just AMD mounting, if I remember correctly. Also, this big DVI thing and the capacitors over here, also, again, just collision problems if you want to put custom coolers on this. So this is another one of those PCBs where I'm like, try to avoid it. Like, if you're gonna go for a 4-phase, probably get this, because it just has enough space for, like, putting extra... Like, it has... First off, it has the most capacitors of the 4-phase PCBs. It has the most space for adding even more capacitors of the 4-phase PCBs. And this also has enough space for you to, like... As far as I know, this just comes with a base plate that already cools the VRM, but if you want to water block it and have to remove it, this is quite easy to just thermotape some Raspberry Pi heatsinks onto. Whereas this has the MOSFETs like spaced out in a weird way where it doesn't really work. And this one might actually just be not enough space. So, yeah. So, like, if you can't get a 6-phase, I would recommend this PCB. But if you can get the 6-phase, I recommend either this, the Baby Hawk from MSI, or the DirectCU from Asus, or if you're really lucky, you can find an SoC from Gigabyte or the Big Hawk from MSI. So that's my recommendations for which cards to get, and I hope that helped. So with that, I want to end on the video here. We are above 20 minutes already, which I hoped I wouldn't. So I'm gonna end it here, and until next time, goodbye.